そろそろ始めてまいりたいと思います。本日は日本弁護士連合会主催の共謀罪に反対するプライバシー権を守るシンポジウムをただいまから開催いたします。まず最初に、本日司会を務めさせて、私は司会を務めさせていただきます、先ほどご紹介していましたでございますが、開催にあたりまして、日本弁護士連合会副会長の西岡康介からまずご挨拶を申し上げます。
本日は共謀罪に反対し、プライバシー権を守るシンポジウムに多数ご参加いただきありがとうございます。私は日本弁護士連合会の共謀罪対策本部を担当しています副会長の吉岡康介と申します。日弁連は共謀罪反対のため意見書や会長声明を公表し、また国会議員会館にて院内学習会を幾度もなく開催しました。この4月にはここで市民集会を、そして5月には飯野ホールでジャーナリスト、学者、市民の方によるリレートークを開催しました。そして6月9日にはこの場で6月9日には今日の講師である国連の人権理事会の特別報告者であるジョセフ・カナタチさんとインターネット電話による中継を行い、法案の問題点につきインタビュー形式で国際シンポジウムを開催しました。残念ながら共謀罪は数の力で押し切られ、6月15日に成立をしました。今日はその七立さんを日弁連にお招きし、成立した共謀罪の問題点について直接お話をいただきます。特に私たちのプライバシー保護のために何をすべきなのか、どのような保障措置が講じられるべきなのか等について改めてご指摘をいただくことになっております。あなたたちの講演の後、国家の情報管理やその監視システムについてドイツに調査に行かれました日弁連の秘密保護法対策本部の本部長代行をされています三宅弁護士からデータコミッショナー制度についてご報告をいただきます。日弁連には何々対策本部というのが結構あります。共謀罪対策本部、憲法問題対策本部、秘密保護法対策本部、本部長はすべて会長がしておりますが、本部長代行となると会長の次ということで事実上のトップでございます。また三宅先生はいわゆる折り掛け問題で公文書に関していろいろ取材を受けたり解説をテレビでされています。したがってテレビに出ていたあの先生だなとご記憶の方もたくさんいらっしゃるかもしれません。さて、秘密保護法と共謀罪、一見接点がないように思われますが、実は密接に関係をしています。今週の10月5日、6日、滋賀県の大津市で日弁連の最大のイベントである人権擁護大会が開催されます。そこでも情報の収集と管理、プライバシー権をテーマとして 取り上げて、秘密保護法、そして共謀罪の廃止を含めた決議案を議論をし、採択をする予定です。ここからはちょっと日弁連の公式見解ではないので聞き流してください。個人的には、私はこの秘密保護法と共謀罪、そして通信傍受法、この3法は2015年、忘れもしません、2015年9月19日に強行採決によって成立した新安保法制と関連で言えば、安保法制が戦争を可能とする表の法律とすれば、秘密保護法、通信傍受法、そして今年成立をさせられた共謀罪、この3法は安保法制を裏から支える治安立法であり、監視社会や国民監視につながる法制度だと思っています。日弁連はそこまでは言っていません。今後は共謀罪対策本部は秘密保護法対策本部と密接に連携協力をし合って、両法律の廃止に向けての取り組みをするとともに、恣意的運用、乱用がなされないよう、それこそ国家の権力作用を監視していきます。なお最後に会場からのご質問をいただく時間を設けております。ご質問がある方は事前に質問用紙にお書きいただき、事務局の方にお渡しください。時間の都合上、すべてを取り上げて、すべてについてお答えすることができないかもしれないことを申し添えて、開会の挨拶とさせていただきます。よろしくお願いします。
プログラムの方に入ってまいります。本日は国連人権理事会特別報告者のジョセフ・カナタチ様からお話をいただくことになっております。それでは、カナタチさん、よろしくお願いします。
Good afternoon or good evening, everybody. I understand that the organizers would like me to sit more or less in front of the camera, but they kind of forget how many airplane seats I've been in over the past several days. So, unless it causes a great inconvenience, I am going to walk around and I'll let the camera capture the screens. My voice is now well known enough, so they have no doubt that it's me who's speaking. It's good to be here, and I'm very happy to be back in Japan again. But I need you to understand something. I need you to understand that although the organizers, the JFBA, have announced very clearly their intention that this evening is also organized as part of the effort against the so-called anti-conspiracy bill. You need to understand that I would be saying exactly the same thing had there not been an anti-conspiracy bill. And it's very important that you understand this. Because the risks to privacy in Japan still exist without the anti-conspiracy bill. So, even had the government of Japan in March of this year not decided to launch the anti-conspiracy bill, with all due respect to the organizers, the JFBA, the Japan Federation of Bar Associations, you should still be organizing this meeting. Because reality is that technologies, and especially the technologies that you all carry around with you. And I'm going to open my bag and reach out for one but I have at least 4, so that the secret services don't listen to everything. And I'm going to ask a question, How many people in the audience have a smartphone? Just put your hands up. Who has a smartphone? Yes, I see I should have asked the other question. Does anybody in the audience not have a smartphone? Don't be shy. 1, 2. Ooh, we have a few privacy interested people there, certainly. Now, let me tell you why, therefore, this is so important. And before I get down to the safeguards, and I would like to spend almost half the time explaining what the specific safeguards should be, I'd like to speak about why. Why is this important, right? And the why, sometimes you see me skip through some slides because I probably prepared too many. This is the first thing I want to speak about. This is what I was speaking about yesterday too, at the symposium organized by the Japan Civil Liberties Union. I'm here because I was invited in January before this by the Japanese Civil Liberties Union. Yet another reason why I would have been here today even without the anti-conspiracy law. The anti-conspiracy bill may make things worse, but the risks are still the same. So, I would like you to think about 2 basic questions. Why you are who you are, and how each one of you decides who you want to be and who you want to become. It would be nicer if many of us were back in our 20s, because then I would have more time to decide who I want to become. But even now that I'm on the wrong side of 55, I still want to decide who I want to become when I'm 60 and 65 and 70 and 80. Because that is part of what liberty is all about. That I have the liberty, the autonomy to decide who I want to become. And this is how, together with my genetic heritage, this is how I develop my personality. And in a democracy, I have the right to free, unhindered development of my personality. And that is why privacy is so important. I have here a very rough diagram. Imagine that this were a stool, right? A stool with 3 legs. And those 3 legs, privacy, freedom of expression, and freedom of information, are the 3 fundamental rights which relate to information. They are information-related fundamental rights. And each of those is essential to privacy. Each of those, is essential to the fundamental right to the free and unhindered development of personality. When I need to decide about something, when I need to decide about who I want to be, whether it is my career, whether it is my sexuality, whether it is with whom I want to be, whether it is with the party I want to vote for, to do so, I need information. I cannot decide without information, which is why I need the right of freedom of expression, because everybody has the right to impart and receive information. I have the right to freedom of information, the freedom to access information, which in Japan you have, but many other countries don't yet have, which means that you have the right to go and access information held by the government to see whether the government is acting well on your behalf. But then, once I receive this information, whether it is about my options in politics, my options which university to go to, my options as which cosmetic to buy, my options about where I should take my sexuality, I decide these in private, either on my own, in the privacy of my own space, or else in an intimate way with one friend, one lover, 2 friends, 3 friends, but the people I choose, not the people somebody else chooses for me. And this is why privacy is so important, so then I can develop my personality further. The first time that I talked about this at the United Nations was on the 9th of March of 2016. And you can go and read my report, you can download it, it's freely available. And I made reference to this right. And I'm very pleased to say that within 1 year of my making reference to this right, the Human Rights Council in March of this year approved the following resolution. And the resolution, and I'm going to read it out so it can be translated. The resolution says, recognizing the right to privacy also as an enabling right to the free development of personality. And in this regard, noting with concern that any violation to the right to privacy might affect other human rights, including the right to freedom of expression and to hold opinions without interference, the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association. So, we're making progress, ladies and gentlemen. Slowly but surely, even at the international level, you are seeing that these rights are being brought together. When I talk about personality and its free development, and I talk about privacy, we're not talking about something which is ignored. This resolution was unanimously agreed by the Human Rights Council in Geneva in March of this year. But this here, this diagram is why I am here in Japan too. And this diagram is why I would have come to Japan anyway, with or without the anti-conspiracy bill. And this diagram, ladies and gentlemen, I've had since 2015, before I became special rapporteur. I have been worried about the situation in Japan for quite some time now. And let's be clear. Japan has nothing to be ashamed of in the sense that many countries are still developing their law about intelligence services. It's what in English would call work in progress. And perhaps at the end of the session, when I thank the interpreters for helping me throughout the session, they will also tell me how to say work in progress in Japanese. But in fact, when this was published, and I didn't draw this, it's copyright from Stratford, look at that, it's a journal 2015. And when I saw this diagram, this was in the context, this diagram was in the context of the discussion about modernizing Japan's intelligence services. And one of the arguments that was brought forward, a reasonable one in fact, was that Japan should create a new central intelligence agency, very much on the model of the American CIA. Because at this moment in time, these different elements of intelligence gathering in Japan do not send data or analysis to a central agency, which then does what we would in English call joined up thinking. But instead, all 5 feed into the Prime Minister's office, and somebody in the Prime Minister's office has got to make sense of it all, which is not an easy job, ladies and gentlemen, right? Let's remember that in many cases, the intelligence agencies of a country are there to protect the security of the country, and they have a legitimate function. What many people are afraid of course, is not the correct use of intelligence agencies, but the abuse of intelligence agencies. Which is why we need the rule of law. In fact, you will notice that not in my other public speeches, not in my letter to Prime Minister Abe, I never said that you shouldn't carry out surveillance. What I have asked for very carefully is, do you have the rule of law when it comes to surveillance? And that is why I note that the Japan Federation of Bar Associations has taken such a deep interest in the subject. So, I am going to ask you to ask yourselves the question, where is the body of law that regulates this situation? Which are the institutions, the independent institutions established by law to oversee these agencies which carry out intelligence in Japan? What are the remedies for a citizen if these agencies overstep the limits? In fact, where is the law that lays down the limits? Because at this moment in time, my research over the past 30 years suggests that in Japan there is no law which lays down these limits. In fact, I would like to refer to you an excellent work which was presented yesterday at the Japan Civil Liberties Union by Deguchi-san, which explains the situation about intelligence, surveillance, and the lack of law in Japan. And it is a very, cold scientific work. It is as if we are saying, in this bottle there is sake, or in this bottle there is no sake. You're going to see me drink it, so clearly there is no sake, at least for now, perhaps after dinner. But what I'm trying to say is, it's a fact. All I want to do this evening is discuss cold facts, not opinions, facts. So let's look at a few facts, shall we? So, and of course, if there's anybody in the audience who thinks I'm wrong and wants to write a question saying, you're wrong, there is a law which regulates this, please write it down. Because I am very happy to buy that person a whole box of sake, not just one bottle, right? So let's go on. Let's go to the definition of surveillance. Okay, because I think it's important that we think about this in concrete terms. And the definition that I have here is one which we are considering to put into an international legal instrument, so that nobody can complain that they don't know the standards, right? Surveillance is any monitoring, non-targeted collecting, observing, or listening by a state, or on its behalf, or at its order. We have removed non-targeted, actually, removed non-targeted. To persons, their movements, their conversations, or their other activities, or communications, including metadata, and or the recording of the monitoring, observation, and listening activities. At this moment in time, we're restricting it to the state. But some of you may ask, can't companies do the same thing? And the answer is yes. But let's stick, just for the sake of this evening's discussion, let's stick to the state, right? And you should read it as any collective. Remove the word non-target, that's a mistake for mine. But let's look at the legitimate purposes for surveillance. So, had we been in Europe, just to give one example, but there are other examples around Europe, let me stick to a European example. And had we to look at Convention 108, which is the European treaty which regulates privacy and data protection, and which today is the biggest treaty on the planet, I have to tell you that last week the Council of Ministers of the Council of Europe agreed to invite yet another country, Argentina, to join the convention, right? The last country, the 51st country, was Tunisia. The 52nd country is Argentina. This is a treaty which is not only open to European states, but to all states in the world. And in that treaty you will find too, Article 9, which says that the only instances when you can interfere with privacy, the state, that treaty was about derogations, but interfere with privacy is what is mentioned in the UN documents, including Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 17 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. The only legitimate purposes for surveillance are the following: the prevention of a real danger, and/or the prevention, detection, investigation, and prosecution of crime, and/or for increasing public safety, and/or protecting state security, and/or the economic interests of the state. But can a state simply say that and get away with it? No, and that's a very big no. You can't just say, oh, I'm doing this for security. No, you can't do that. Instead, it must pass very strict tests. And so, any surveillance measure must, first of all, be provided for by law. There must be a law, because we believe in the rule of law. And that law must include in it clear safeguards for privacy, it must establish clear remedies for the breach of privacy, and the most important tests of all, the tests are: the surveillance measures must be both proportionate and necessary. And those tests, proportionate and necessary, not in any society, but in a democratic society. They mustn't be proportionate and necessary in a tin pot dictatorship. They must be proportionate and necessary in a democratic society. So if you take a measure which is disproportionate, then that is not acceptable at law. If you take a measure just because the police or the security services are, it's nice to have that, isn't it? No, the test is not nice to have. The test is must have. The test is without it, you cannot do your job. And if I had to pick upon Mr. Yuichi Kaido here as my example, as my victim for this evening, right? I would say that if you suspect Mr. Kaido of carrying out a crime, or about to carry out a crime, then you carry out surveillance on Mr. Kaido, not on everybody in the room. That is targeted surveillance, right? That you choose your target and you focus on your target. How you get to your target is a complex matter, and we can discuss that later if you wish. So keep this in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that if afterwards I'm to discuss 10, 15, 20 safeguards, however much time I will have left, then each of those safeguards must be proportionate and necessary in a democratic society. Okay. Here I have some quotations. This was the former German Interior Minister. Privacy is an issue of freedom, democracy, and a digital society. The ex-president of Brazil, Dilma Rousseff, saying that without privacy there can be no democracy. This was pretty close to the date when she found out that the secret services of another country were listening into her conversations too. It wasn't only Mrs. Merkel who was subjected to that. And here we are. Dilma Rousseff agrees with me. She wasn't one of my students, but she agrees with me. Here we are. Without the right of privacy, there is no real freedom of speech or freedom of opinion, and so there is no actual democracy, Dilma Rousseff said. And privacy is also closely linked to autonomy, right? So we talk about self-determination and the rights of people to self-determination, but we talk about the rights of people to self-determination. And this takes me back to what I was telling you first, about the right to free development of one's personality. And this is something which came out from the latest research, that autonomy comes from the inside. I wish I had more time to tell you about it, but in a study of children, both in Asia and in the West, it came out that they studied children from the age of 5 to 14, and they found that their behavior suggests that autonomy is universal. It comes from the inside, right? The way that children behave. But what I need to emphasize to you, especially that we're on the internet, and especially that eventually I want to take the discussion today where we started, to the smartphones. In an internet without borders, we need safeguards without borders. This is why today's subject is not only important to Japan, but it's very important to people all around the world. And why I'm taking this message all around the world, not just to Japan. So in an internet without borders, we need safeguards without borders, and we need remedies which go across borders if our rights are infringed. So let me just walk you through a few examples, because yesterday the people who attended the JCLU symposium also found them interesting. And I noticed that everybody in the room is over the age of 25, right? It's a safe bet. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, that all of us remember the days when there were no smartphones, right? And all of us remember the days when there was no internet. And I'd like you to ask yourself a simple question. Question 1. What is the great difference today, in 2017, and go back 40 years? Go back 50 years. So 40 is enough. Even 30 is enough. But do we need to go back 40, 30 years? Here I'm only going to go back 2 years. Okay? And I want to show you how fast things are going. I want to spend 5 minutes, not more, just showing you how fast things are going. This slide is 2 years and 1 month old. Okay? 27th August 2015. So while the Japan Federation of Bar Associations was worrying about the new security law, Facebook was celebrating 1 billion people using Facebook on Monday. That was in 2015. How fast did things go? February 2nd, 2017, 2 billion people. That's in 1 year, 6 months, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the most important thing too is that this figure, and this was in 2015, nearly everyone using Facebook on their phones, on their mobile. So now you see, I'm bringing the two stories together. Your mobile phone and social media. But let's not only look at Facebook, shall we? Let's look at something else. Snapchat. So Snapchat passed Twitter in June 2016, a year ago. 150 million people were using it. In just 4 years, it went from 0 to 150 million. But if you think Snapchat was interesting, right? Then it went in on Facebook as it hit 6 billion daily views. Now, just in case there's anybody in the room who doesn't understand why the number of views is so important, it's because of money, right? Money makes the world go round, and for every view, that's money, that's advertising revenue. So it's not only the number of users, registered users, but it's the number of people who see things, which is very important. And let's look at the way the money went, right? Because money talks. That's another thing I need to read in Japanese. Money talks, right? So, let's look at the date here. Right? 9th November 2015, Snapchat was getting close to Facebook on 6 billion daily video views. Get your heads around that figure, right? 6 billion every day. Make the zeros, do the math, as the Americans would say. 6 billion every day. And then, January, so this is how many months later, let's check, right? 3 months, 9th November 2015, January 12th, 7 billion. We've gone up by 1 billion in 3 months. 8 billion, February. March, 8 billion. April, 10 billion. Get your heads around it, ladies and gentlemen. How fast things are going. And what does this mean? This just gives you an idea how many people are using their phones to watch Facebook, to watch Snapchat, to send emails, to surf on the internet. But that should also tell you how many people are being watched. Because every time you make a click, every time you make a search, you're leaving, every time you send an email, you're leaving an electronic track. Electronic tracks, which all of us when we were children did not leave. That is the great difference today. When you and I, ladies and gentlemen, were children, when we were playing around, when we went to school, when we went to university, we were not leaving these tracks. We were not creating this mountain, this tsunami of data that is hitting us every day. That is what we're creating every single day. A huge tsunami. Which is why some people have called this the golden age of surveillance. Because if you were an intelligence agency 20 years ago, you did not have such a rich field as you have today. You did not have all the metadata that you have today. And very often, I have done work with the intelligence agencies and with the police for more than 30 years now. And my true friends will admit that when I ask the following question, if I give you a choice between the content of the data, of some data, and the metadata, the data which tells you when Mr. Kaido called Ms. Fujimoto, when they, what do you think they prefer? They want the metadata. Because the metadata helps you come up with a very accurate profile of a person's communications, who they talk to, if they're fighting, if they're lovers, if they are going shopping. Because the metadata includes visits to the sites where they are going shopping, visits. The metadata includes their credit cards, it includes a lot of information. And this is what I read out yesterday, right? And people enjoyed it, so I'm going to read it out again. And this, I deliberately chose a quotation from somebody who had no internet, from somebody who had no mobile phone, from somebody who feels informed, right? This is Alexander Solzhenitsyn, just in case you haven't recognized him from the back. And both for the interpreters and for the audience outside the room, I'm going to read this. As every man goes through life, he fills in a number of forms for the record, each containing a number of questions. There are thus hundreds of little threads radiating for every man, millions of threads in all. If these threads were suddenly to become visible, the whole sky would look like a spider's web. And if they materialized like rubber bands, buses and trams and even people would lose the ability to move, and the wind would be unable to carry torn up newspapers or autumn leaves along the streets of the city. If only I could write like that, right? Because there's a poetry in his prose. right? But this was written in the 1960s, ladies and gentlemen. And he was scared of the millions of threads coming out from the forums. What you and I, and especially our children, are doing every day is we are filling in millions of forms every millisecond. Now think about that. Because the data that you are giving away to the companies, to the governments, just by using your mobile phone, is equivalent to millions of forms being filled every second, indeed every millisecond. And that's why I've said that smart cities make Solzhenitsyn's concerns look minuscule, because it's not only the forms that we fill, it's the electronic tracks that we leave everywhere, and of which most of us often are never conscious. Sometimes I stop to ask one of my classes, and I ask my students, so, and especially if it's 9 o'clock in the morning, it works better in the morning, right? You ask them, it's 9 o'clock, 5 minutes past 9. So how much data have you put on the internet today? And students start saying this, well, I might have sent a couple of tweets, and I think I put 16 likes on Facebook, and I think I sent one picture, etc. And that's what they think about. They think about the user-generated content, which they consciously put. Something they said, or a picture they sent. But they don't think about all their fingerprints and footprints on the internet. They don't think about all the information they've given with every click on every website. And that's the real danger in profiling people in the electronic age. And the problem that I was pointing out is that the English language so far has no word for surveillance in British and Word English. But the French have it. It's spelled exactly the same way. It's surveillable, which means that through our behavior with these electronic devices, we are making ourselves surveillable, subject to being surveilled. Because we're always online, right? How many of you in this room are using smartphones with data open? Probably all of you, those people who have a smartphone, right? And we're always on, and whether it's inside, we're using our Wi-Fi. Whether it's outside, you see people all the time outside. In Christian countries, there's also a joke. You know, I found this on the internet, so it must be true, right? Anyway, so there are some people who would like to believe that their God or their Christ or whatever is online too. But more than anything, I think there's this general impression that you see in this card too, that once it's online, it's virtually impossible to scrub out, and the data on you will follow you around for life, right? These are two impressions which even our children now are beginning to understand. Okay. Yesterday at the JCLU symposium, there was a very successful interview with Edward Snowden. But let me tell you something, what Edward Snowden said in 2014 in an interview in Germany. Because yesterday he did not have enough time to explain. Now, as you probably know, there is evidence which has not been denied by the American government. There is evidence that the Americans have given X-key score to the Japanese. Until we have evidence to the contrary, we have to accept that as being true. Let me remind you what Edward Snowden said you can do. You could read anyone's email in the world, anybody you've got an email address for. Any website. You can watch traffic to and from it. Any computer that an individual sits at, you can watch it. Any laptop that you're tracking, you can follow it as it moves from place to place throughout the world. What did he say? It's a one-stop shop for access to the NSA's information. You can tag information, and he said, because here he was speaking to a German, let's say that you work at a major German corporation, and I want access to that network. I can track your username on a website, on a form somewhere. I can track your real name. I can track associations with your friends. And I can build what's called a fingerprint, which is network activity unique to you, which means anywhere you go in the world, anywhere you try to sort of hide your online presence, your identity. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have gone a far cry from when I was young. No, let me change it. When I was younger, I'm still young. But as I walked in here, as I walked into this building, I think it was in this floor, I saw something quite historical. You know what it was? Historical? It was a phone fixed to the wall, right? And I don't know if you have one here. Ah, yes, there is one. Look, there's a phone fixed to the wall. Remember these things? You know, they're still around in some places. And that phone. So the problem, of course, is that the laws that we have today, and the laws you have in Japan, were largely designed to intercept calls made from a phone on that line fixed to the wall. And by a little bit of extension later to a call from me to Mr. Kaido, me to Ms. Fujimoto on this phone. But they weren't designed to tackle all of this. The laws were not designed to provide safeguards against X-key score. So, if any government on the planet comes to tell you, oh, it's all right, we have a law about interception of telephone calls, then that's fine, but that's not what I'm worried about. This is what I'm worried about. Because in the surveillance society, and if you want the latest map we have, and this was released, can you see that top secret comment? Well, USA, Australia, Canada, Great Britain, New Zealand. Where is X-key score? 3 years ago, 4 years ago, this is at least 4 years old, probably 5. There were 150 sites and 700 servers. I am assuming that this has grown quite a bit in the last 5 years. And if you notice, and you see a little red blob there, unless my geography is wrong, that says Japan. So according to the information given to the British Secret Services, to the Australian Secret Services, to the New Zealand and Canadian Secret Services, the United States is saying we have X-key score running out of Japan too. If that is correct, then I have a concern. Because I would like to see the safeguards at law which exist for this to be used. Can you understand why I started by saying the anti-conspiracy law didn't even need to be introduced for serious Japanese people and myself to be worried? Because we have many other things to worry about. And this, of course, is where Mr. Zuckerberg is wrong, right? That the age of privacy is over. I have lots of evidence to show you that the age of privacy is over. But it will be over if we don't put in the right safeguards, which is why I'm here to talk about safeguards. Let me just get on to this. If you go to my website, my UN website, which is easy to find, all you have to do is Google Cannataci, one word, and it will take you there. You will see that even after my last report to the United States, I have not yet finished my report to the United States, I have carried out a 10-day visit to the United States at the invitation of the US government. And it's going to take me another 6 to 8 months to finish that report, which I will present to the United Nations Human Rights Council in March of 2018. But I can already tell you that while the United States has a number of safeguards in place, I don't think they're enough. I'm not going to go into detail. I think it's fair that the United States knows first. But what I can say is what led me to write the letter to the government of Japan on the 18th of May of 2017 is that while the United States may not be perfect, if this screen is the number of safeguards that the United States has, I do not have evidence to show that safeguards in Japan are bigger than this little yellow blob. And it's serious, ladies and gentlemen, it's very serious. Which is why, as a friend of Japan, I wrote to the government to ask, listen, you're now bringing in yet another law. Can you please tell me what safeguards you have or you plan to take the opportunity to put in to protect against privacy? And once again, I emphasize, my questions would have still existed had there not been any anti-conspiracy attack. Let's go on, right? In fact, this is a report which went in the Interior Journal, a journal which is read a lot. It's called On the Hill, which, as you know, refers to Capitol Hill in the United States. And you can see it was called Tough Love from a Critical Friend. Because that is my role, ladies and gentlemen. I am the critical friend. I am the person who unfortunately has got to say the inconvenient truth. And you know what it's like. I'm sure all of you have a critical friend in your life. Sometimes it's a member of the family, sometimes it's not. But he or she is normally the person you trust to tell you the things, and you don't really like it, but he's right. I have to do something about it, right? Or she's right. I have to do something about what she's telling me. And that's my job. I get no pleasure out of criticizing things. I would much rather go away and say, Japan leads democratic nations in its law on privacy. Japan leads democratic nations in its law on surveillance. That's why I'm here. I'm here so that we can establish a constructive dialogue to lead to that. And my job is to persuade the government of Japan to put in the right safeguards. Now, I would, and I've explained this to some journalists, but I think it's worthwhile explaining here again, I would have much preferred the government of Japan to have given the normal space of 1 to 2 years of consultation about any law which may affect surveillance. And under those circumstances, I would have written privately to the government. For each letter, I would have given it 60 days to answer, and then I write and another 60 days to answer. That's the way I normally do things. That's the way I'm doing with other governments. But this is not what happened in Japan. In Japan, what I got was a clear intention to finish everything from beginning to end to both houses of parliament in 90 days. Now, I don't know about how many people in the room are parents, but I am a parent, and to make a child takes at least 9 months, and you have to get there first, you have to court your partner until you get to get having the child. There was no courting, was there here, right? There was, this is it, this is what you're going to get, and we're going to give birth to it in less than 90 days. Okay. Under such circumstances, you perhaps understand why rather than writing first politely to the government, I wrote politely, but I wrote in public. Because I felt that people, in the little debate that there would be, not enough, to my mind, there should be awareness of the need for safeguards. That is all I'm saying. And I'm not saying, frankly, that one should not criminalize an act of conspiracy. Do so. Many other countries have criminalized conspiracy. But where are the safeguards? And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the other countries are perfect on safeguards. In fact, I'm chasing all the other countries to get their act together too. And different countries have different levels of safeguards. But they didn't wait to introduce them because of anti-conspiracy. But because of the debate on surveillance, more and more countries are increasing their safeguards. And we'll speak about that in a minute. And in fact, I could go through a whole load of screens here, but I won't do so out of interest for time. Yeah, about what's happening in the US and the UK, and you can see the problems with the law in the UK, for example. And the UK has more safeguards than Japan has, right? But even the UK is being accused. The accusation here is the most invasive surveillance law in democratic history. I'm not saying that, I'm just quoting it here, right? I'm happy about that law, I've said so, and I'm going to meet the UK government at its invitation to discuss that law and hopefully eventually some improvements to that law, right? And you can see the problems. Everyone who can now see your entire internet history, including the tax bill, the Department of Work and Pensions, Food Standards Agency, etc. The law in the UK is very wide, too wide in my opinion. And then you find out that the decisions of the court itself in the UK said that the UK security agencies unlawfully collected data for 17 years. And this is what we're trying to avoid. My criticism of the UK law is that in a number of cases is legitimized practices which should have been outlawed. And this is one of the serious things we have to look at in Japan too. You have to be very careful that you don't have a new law which legitimizes practices which should in fact be outlawed, right? And then you see what happened. The government's surveillance powers to be challenged to the High Court, and the High Court said, yes, you can take this to the European Court, right? That's okay, we said that. I was pointing to German rules being partly unconstitutional, but Germany has reformed its main intelligence service. And I'm not going to go into this because I understand that the professor is going to comment about this later. But in fact, I'm going to say, before I hear what he has to say, I'm going to invite him to join me eventually in meetings I will have with the Dutch secret services, because you will find that the Dutch law is much more robust than the German law, right? And I have already publicly criticized the new German law on this one, especially on the new powers of foreign nationals, because I find that it goes against the UN principles on privacy. But let's look at this law. The new power that the German police have to hack smartphones, right? So, what's the problem if you're an intelligence agency? Or indeed if you're a police force? Because the problem is the same. The problem is that more and more people are using encryption. Which means, while the data is in transit, it's almost useless intercepting it, because you have to spend far too much time with far too many computers for too many years in order to de-encrypt it, to decipher it. By the time you decipher it, the danger will be over, or you will not be blown up, right? So So what's the best way, the most practical way to try and find out what people are saying or sending on the phone? Is to plant malware, right? To hack basically into a smartphone. And once it arrives, and once it's unencrypted, you try to read it. Or you try to listen in. The only problem, of course, ladies and gentlemen, is that your smartphone contains much more information than that. Right? In fact, these days, in most cases, when I ask the question, and I'm going to ask it again because it's a useful and effective question, so to all those people in the room who have a smartphone, right? And they ask the question, who knows about you most? Your husband, your wife, your partner, or your smartphone? Right? Because many people now, thanks to the searches they carry out, thanks to the information they send, thanks to the messages and emails they send and receive, have trusted so many intimate details to their smartphone and much less to their partner or their spouse. Though some people actually do ask their partner, oh, can you read it? It's on my phone, right? But that's more of a minority these days. Let's go on, because I need to finish. And I promised that we're going to talk about, so I'm going to just say this, the UK court, the European court has come up with a decision, Tellis Vergetu and Watson, on the 6th of December of 2016, which that decision clearly states that mass surveillance is not proportional. Okay? So that's one of the safeguards that you need to introduce in Japan too, one against mass surveillance. But let's go this way. Okay. This is just to let you know about something that I've been piloting. In March of this year, I announced that in March of next year, I will probably be recommending to the Human Rights Council the need to look at draft new international legal instrument, whether it's soft law, such as a recommendation, whether it's hard law, such as a treaty, which deals with surveillance and privacy. And what I'm going to tell you now, I think this is going to be the first meeting where you're going to see a number of safeguards which I hope would be accepted by others to be included in that. All I can say for now is that at least 200 people from around the world agree with the following safeguards, because we have been consulting with a lot of people. And I don't think they would mind, but the European Federation of Bar Associations has just the day before yesterday also sent me a letter of support on this initiative with their own comments. So let's quickly, and you can see, I mean, this is on the internet. If you just put Cannataci and surveillance in Google, you're going to find all of this. So I'm just going to quickly go past all of this and come to the safeguards. Okay? I'm going to keep on talking about safeguards until Mr. Guido, somebody else reminds me that I'm going to run out of time. Because I'm going to talk about safeguards for a long time. Okay, so the first safeguard is that no surveillance can be carried out unless there is a law. Right? The rule of law is safeguard number one. So, no surveillance can be carried out. This also means that the law shall identify the purposes and situations where surveillance or the surveillance system, let's remember, arguments you've already had in Japan. This is not only human surveillance now. More and more surveillance will become smart surveillance. Algorithms which are watching you from cameras. You've had this debate in Osaka, for example, I believe, right? And so, what you need to do is the law must identify the purposes and define the category of crimes or threats for which the surveillance system is to be used. Is it going to be used for murder or for pickpocketing? right? What is it going to be used for? I'm not going to have time to get to it, but one of the things that I should tell you about immediately is that one of the safeguards we are asking for is that before any automated system is introduced, it must go through a PIA, a privacy impact assessment for each and every system. Also, the rule of law requires that no surveillance is carried out by an agency, the very existence of which is secret. A secret service does not mean that the existence of the agency must be secret. A secret service must mean that some of the people it is observing and some of its methods can remain secret, but secret does not mean not subject to oversight. That I want to talk about too. So, safeguard number 2, independent authorization. So think about it. Think about the diagram that I showed you first. The diagram that I showed you from 2015 about surveillance in Japan, right? Does that, and ask yourself, so who carries out independent authorization of surveillance? And I'm not talking about phone calls, ladies and gentlemen. I'm talking about everything else, about the 1 million other ways in which you can gather data on a person, right? Where are? Who carries out the independent authorization? So we're talking about a system where if you want to carry out authorization, surveillance on Mr. Kaido or Ms. Fujimoto, you need to go to somebody independent outside the police, outside the intelligence service, and demonstrate what in American law is called probable cause, what in European law is called reasonable suspicion. You have a suspicion, and therefore you want to carry out the surveillance. Third, only targeted surveillance, right? So you should be, the law should provide, and it should be written into the law, that deliberate monitoring of an individual's behavior by the state should only be targeted surveillance carried out on the basis of reasonable suspicion, right? So non-targeted surveillance is not acceptable. The fourth one, when and who. It should provide that the individual concerned is likely to have committed a serious crime or is likely to about to commit a serious crime. Look at the word serious, right? We can argue for some time about what a serious crime is, and in fact, to be fair to the Japanese government, it did introduce the notion of a serious crime eventually into the anti-conspiracy law, but it's not only anti-conspiracy that we are worried here, right? We're worried about surveillance. And if you notice, in this section, who gives the authorization, right? It shall have an independent authority, independent of the police, independent of the intelligence services. Because this is the system of checks and balances that we want to see in a democratic society. For all kinds of surveillance. Now, this, however, is not the only independent entity which we want to see. Right? Safeguard number 5. You should also be able to gather either a national warrant under national law or what we're calling an international warrant. I'm not going to spend too much time here on this because I don't have the time. But at this moment in time, there is a great problem internationally when you want to transfer data or make inquiries, even to Facebook, Google, whoever, to get data about people. It can take an average of 11 months to go through the courts and get data to what is known as mutual legal assistance. So one of the things we would like to do is to speed things up and help the police and the intelligence services. But not only them, also the prosecutors and the victims. everybody would benefit from an international data warrant. But I won't spend time on that now. 6, notification of persons subjected to surveillance. So first, Professor, I was referring to one of the jurisdictions in Europe where I've carried out some work on the subject. And when I asked them, so they will admit that they will, in that jurisdiction, I won't mention which one for now, but they will admit that there are at least 50 people they notify every year that they have been subjected to surveillance. Why is it important? Have they paid damages? Yes. Why didn't these things end up in the newspapers? Why do you think they didn't end up in the newspapers? Because they settled out of court. Why did they settle out of court? Not to get into the newspapers. Why do they settle out of court? Because remember that the fact that you were under surveillance could have cost you your job. It could have cost you a promotion. And that is why, in those cases, people got compensation. That is why the citizen requires a remedy. We're not saying that the state should have no right of surveillance, but what we're saying is the citizen should have a remedy. And notification and damages can be a remedy. Because once you are on a security blacklist, once you are under surveillance, for certain jobs, you could be denied promotion, you could be denied getting the job. So it's a serious matter, ladies and gentlemen. This is not something like going to watch a James Bond movie. This is serious. Citizens could be losing promotions, could be losing jobs because of the fact that they were placed under surveillance for all the wrong reasons, and that the surveillance then turned out to yield no results. Safeguard 7, time limitation. Set the time how long surveillance can be carried out. This is already done with regard to telephone interception in many countries, but we are saying it should be done to all forms of surveillance. It's not just, we're going to spy on Ms. Fujimoto for the next, oh, we don't care, for as long as we want. No. You have to go to the authority, justify why you want to put Ms. Fujimoto under surveillance, for how long she's going to be under surveillance, and if that doesn't work out, you have to go back again after 3 months or 6 months and get permission again. This is the 8th safeguard, and this is the independent oversight authority for ex post oversight. In other words, this is totally independent from the authority which gives you permission to carry out surveillance. This is an authority which comes back afterwards to check what you as a police force, what you as an intelligence service have been doing to see that if you've overstepped the limits, or if you've actually in practice not observed the law, or you've somehow bent the law, then it can bring the attention of the authorities, and in fact it can try to achieve remedies to those cases. Let's go on. And of course, I mean, with the time, and especially for the lawyers in the room, I can take you to the cases of the European Court, the Hungarian case, and the Zakharov versus Russia, and you know, for the lawyers in the room who could have the arguments on where these come out from in European law. The International Data Access Warrant is the safeguard number 9, which I've talked about. But safeguard number 10, that there should be reasonable suspicion of probable cause, right? Safeguard number 11, that this should be the least intrusive measure, that surveillance is not the first thing you do, but it's the last thing you do if you can't get to your evidence or you can't get to your legal action without surveillance. So you have to prove to the person giving authorization that this is the least intrusive measure. Safeguard number 12, that the measure is necessary, proportional, and universal, right? Why universal? Because I don't know which law my esteemed colleague, the professor, is going to talk about in Germany. But if he's going to talk about the BND law, then I'm going to disagree with him. I'm going to tell you now, right? Because the German law says that we are going to treat German citizens and the EU citizens in one way. But Japanese citizens, who cares about that? I disagree with that. Because the way that I read the UN Declaration on Human Rights, it says everyone has the right to privacy. It doesn't say only US citizens have the right to privacy and about all the others who don't care. It doesn't say only EU citizens have the right to privacy and the others who don't care. It says everyone has the right to privacy. And in fact, this is why I was recommending the Dutch law first. One of the good things about the Dutch law is that when it comes to safeguards and when it comes to damages, it makes no discrimination between Dutch citizens and non-Dutch citizens, between EU citizens and non-EU citizens. And that to me is fair, right? If there is a safeguard, it's for everybody, because everyone has the fundamental right to privacy. I'm going to go through some, to finish, I'm going to go through some more safeguards, and you will see that these are those safeguards which we classify as transparency safeguards. Safeguard number 13 is that publicly available periodic reports allowing for a substantive and comprehensive review of the activities of relevant agencies to other state branches, such as the legislative branch and or the judicial branch of the state. In other words, not only do you have the safeguard of pre-authorization, not only do you have, which the Dutch law has, not only do you have the safeguard, and the British law has, not only have the safeguard of post-oversight, but then post-oversight by a specialized independent agency, but then we are saying there should be a legislative control, there should be a committee of parliament which has oversight of the oversight agencies to make sure that public money is not being spent in a way which goes against fundamental human rights in that country, right? And there should be transparency reports by the state in respect to all requests made to corporations and other non-state actors. How many times would you know in Japan? How many times Japan has requested Facebook for information about Japanese citizens? Would you go to Facebook's site to know how many times Japan has requested information? And all governments do this. This is not something bad. But shouldn't you know about it? Right? Incidentally, this is somewhere where the American Congress, the American Senate is still insisting also with the US Secret Services because they refuse to give it those numbers, right? This is not a problem which only Japan has. It's a problem which is present in many countries, right? And you can see regarding the categories and frequency, you're not going to say, I asked for information about this Fujimoto. But you're going to say, to give an idea of scale, that there were 300 citizens about whom requests were made. The number of requests is not necessarily indicative. So you shouldn't see 3,000 requests, because there could be 30 requests about Ms. Fujimoto. That one goes to Facebook, the other goes to Google, the other goes... You see what I mean? You need to be, and the other goes to the French police, you need to be clear as to how many people you are surveying. That is what you want to know. Because that is what tells you whether you are a police society or not. Are you a police state? East Germany, out of a population of 17 million, had 6 million under surveillance. That is the key figure. How many people you have under surveillance. And that is why, if out of 80 million, 100 million people in Japan, you need to know how many people in Japan are under surveillance. That's the key figure which you need to know, right? And the law must provide regulations and the power of agencies who carry out the surveillance. 16, right? there should be not only reports by the state, but there should be reports by the corporations about how many requests they receive. That way, you can check and see who is telling the truth, right? Because you would hope that the figures released by the state tally match the figures released by the corporations. Safeguard 17, setting up of a constant process of dialogue with civil society. This is why this meeting today is so important. The meeting organized by the Japan Federation of Bar Associations. This is why the meeting organized by the Japanese Civil Liberties Union yesterday is so important. Because we need to have a constant dialogue to maintain trust in the state and in order to understand what the state is doing. I meet intelligence agencies on a very regular basis, and I would like to think, now, intelligence agencies will tell you, we don't have friends, we only have acquaintances, right? We only have contacts. But I would like to think that those intelligence agencies, and I tell them all the time, be more transparent. Have secrecy, but only when you need it, right? Sometimes I have the unenviable task of 25 different agencies in the room, and I'm supposed to get them to talk to each other. And all they're interested is taking notes and saying nothing. It seems to be genetic, right? But we need to speak. We need to create trust, right? So, a constant process of dialogue with civil society and academia is very important. So civil society understands how and why surveillance systems are set up, and the intelligence agencies understand why people are worried about it. So one of the surprising things in my research over the past 10 years has been to find out that in many countries, people want more cameras, not less cameras. It's true. What can I say? This is science. This is what the scientific said. But why do they want them? No, that's another reason. My neighbor has his dog and it keeps pissing on my car. I don't know how you're going to translate that, ladies, but that's the truth, right? So you will find that the reasons why people keep asking for cameras go from serious reasons, from the sublime to the ridiculous. So we have to be careful about that too, right? Another safeguard. States are prohibited from directly or indirectly ordering or compelling service providers in their jurisdiction to disconnect, shut down access, or otherwise broadly disrupt or block flows of information. Or you will see, right, later on, or to arrest those people. In Brazil, twice already, at least, they've shut down WhatsApp. More than 100 million people in Brazil use WhatsApp. What happens when you shut down WhatsApp? You're preventing communication. And is anybody telling me that 100 million people are committing a conspiracy? That's a pretty big conspiracy. You don't need to stop WhatsApp to know what's going on if 100 million people are involved. With statistical probability will tell you that one of them is going to come and tell you you'll be uninformed, right? But it also prevents freedom of expression. And shutting down the internet or shutting down an app is a favorite way of dictatorships of trying to control situations, right? 19 or 22, these are other safeguards, right? Measures which negatively impact the security. What does this mean? What does this mean? This means, should somebody in government be able to go to a service provider and ask them to weaken encryption? No, they shouldn't be able to do that, right? Because that will only harm the good guys. The bad guys will always be able to get encryption from elsewhere, right? So let's not have silly ideas like that. Once again, the Dutch government has come out with a paper which clearly says that backdoors to encryption is a bad idea. There are many more safeguards. I can't tell you about them because I just received a sign which I knew I'm going to receive, which is, Joe, it's time to slow down and continue. So I am going to thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you.
続きまして、ドイツにおけるデータコミッショナー制度について、第二東京弁護士会第60回人権擁護大会シンポジウム第二分科会実行委員会委員長である三宅宏弁護士からお話をいただきます。よろしくお願いいたします。10分ということですので、触りだけです。私のレポートは、69分の55巻ですが、ちょうど共謀罪法案がですね、国会で採決に強行されるときにですね、フェイスブックでですね、その様子を見て、で、金立さんが集会に、日弁連にインターネットで集会にでコメントされて、それでプライバシーとか個人情報の保護がなされてない。確かにそうだ。これがやっぱ帰って日本に行ってですね、法案がこういう点で不十分だということを言わなきゃいけないと言おうと思ってたところがですね、法律が通ってしまったと、ひどいなと思って、思った点をですね、少し今日はその法案が採決強行された中間報告という形で採決強行された時の感想をですね、少し述べるだけです。69分の55の第1の1はですね、共謀罪法案の採決強行後の状況で、プライバシーや表現の自由をいかに守るのかということを考えなきゃいけない。その1は問題点ですね。これは海部さんがいつも指摘されていることですし、2は通信傍受法が改正されているので、ほとんど、通信傍受できる状況ができていると。ここで、GPS 操作については最高裁の判決が出ますが、69分の55の一番下のところに、CG のコンピューターに侵入してその中の情報を入手する、これをオンライン操作、それからラスター操作と言われるのは、網羅的な電子的個人データの照合、要するにプロファイリングをするということを申したと思いますが、そういうことがされていたと。ちょうどドイツよりオランダの方がいいよと今日お話がありましたが、何かやっぱドイツにあるんじゃないかと思って言ったわけです。それは日本の、憲法の研究者はドイツの憲法判例をずっと研究しておりますので、その研究成果を踏まえてですね、言ったということで、これまでのドイツの反省というのはナチスドイツの反省を踏まえて、昨日はオランダもナチスの占領下における反省を踏まえてという話がありましたけれども、連邦憲法裁判所が自己情報決定権とか、それから IT 基本権、IT システムの秘密性と完全なる保証をする、完全性の保証をするという基本権を宣言してですね、それに基づいてデータコミッショナーがさまざまな施策をされている、具体的な様子を見たということです。細かいところはもうお読みいただいて、少し金立さんが最新の判例を今日はご紹介されていますが、それに至るですね、ドイツでの連邦憲法裁判所の判例などは69分の59あたりで、連邦憲法裁判所が対応の歯止めをかけてきたさまざまな判決がある。ドイツは地方裁判所、高等裁判所、最高裁判所って一つあるんですが、別途にバイパスでですね、憲法裁判所っていうのがあって、憲法問題になるとそっちのバイパスに行くんですよね。で、憲法異議って権利を侵害された人たちが憲法異議を出すとですね、でそこはですね、16人の裁判官がいて、8人は金立さんのようなですね、研究者、しかも IT の専門家もですね、そこに入っていらっしゃるということで、私はそのお一人に憲法裁判所で、お話を聞くことができて、いろいろ学ぶことがあったということです。で、その後ですね、今日のお話の後5分は、 69分の65についてお話しします。憲法裁判所はですね、必要性があるレベルでしか認められない、いろんな捜査、人間の内心に関わる捜査、内面に関わってくる捜査について、刑事裁判上の権利とかですね、そのようなものを、要件にする限りでしか認めないということですので、そういうような運用を踏まえながらですね、ヒューマニストユニオンというところに行きました。これは16日ですから、15日に法案取ったんでしたっけね。なんかがっくりきてですね、これ持って帰って日本で発表しなきゃいけないと思ってるところがもう通っちゃったのかと思ったんですが、ここのところは、この今ちょっと映像に映ってるのは憲法裁判所ですね。これ憲法裁判所ですけど、日本の裁判所と違ってトランスペランシー、さっき出ましたよね、透明性ということで裁判所自体がもうガラス張りになってる。そこが裁判所の日本の裁判所とちょっと違う発想がここに見えると思いますね。ここはちょっと飛ばします。この真ん中に、いらっしゃるのがヒューマニストユニオンのじゃないわ、もう一つだ、こちら、この人にあったんですね。この人はですね、日本でいうとですね、情報公開クリアリングハウスのミキさんみたいな人です。お分かりになりますかね。森友問題で私と共に出てらっしゃる。でそういう市民団体の代表がですね、ベルリン州のデータコミッショナー、情報公開と個人情報保護の局の最高のポストにあるんです。そういうところがですね、日本と違うところだと思います。そこでお話を聞いたのがですね、最高裁判所の裁判例に対する評価のところは、一応評価はしていると。でもドイツの裁判所と、69分の65のですね、第1項の 2の下の方でですね、ヨーロッパの欧州司法裁判所での判決と、今日金田さんがお話になる少し前の判決等についての説明を受けて、ドイツの裁判所の、プライバシー保護の判決と、それから欧州全体でのですね、プライバシーの保護のやっぱり熱い、そういう施策がですね、ずっと関連しながらなされてるんだというところを少し理解していただけると思います。それで日本も GPS の操作をするのは任意ソーシャルであればダメだということは、今度は3月の判決に出たんですよとちょっと言ったんですけど、GPS あんまり使ってませんよと、スマホのショートメールを大体警察が使うんです。そこにメールを送ってですね、被疑者今、内定している人がどの辺にいるかをショートメールでやるんですよ。でそこのところの規制がなかなか問題になってるんですよということですが、多分これからの日本でもですね、おそらく出てくる問題なので、そういうものをどうやって規制するのかということを考えないといけない。で先ほどの中でですね、事後的な評価機関とかチェックをするというところがありましたが、ここが私は一番の肝でして、69分の66ページの真ん中あたりにですね、アンダーラインをしています。これはですね、要するにドイツの警察と、それから憲法擁護庁、これは憲法を守るというか、プラスのイメージが出ますけど、いろんな人の情報を集めてですね、憲法を破壊する人はどういう人かということのデータを集めてるんですね。でそこは共同のデータセンターになってるんですが、そこにですね、データコミッショナーが自ら乗り込んでいってですね、右翼過激左翼じゃありませんね、ここね、右翼過激派のデータベースを見てですね、これは単なる市民運動家だと、右翼過激派ではない、日本に置かれるのはこれは単なる市民運動家であって左翼過激派ではないということをチェックしてですね、データを削除するんだという話を聞いたときはですね、そんなこと本当にやってるんですかともう一回確かめたんですが、そういう手続きを本当はちゃんとしないとですね、情報ということでデータを集めてこれからおそらくされるようになるんだと思いますが、廃止を求めるとともに、そういうもし運用がされるとしたら、そこのチェックをする手立てを考えなきゃいけないということが必
必要になるんじゃないかということを考えました。でいろいろ聞いてて、69分の67に民間企業における個人情報収集という第4で書いてきましたが、今まで話になったのは政府の話なんですが、民間も付け足しでやってますよという感覚なんです。ここちょっと大事になって押さえてくださいね。民間企業におけるプロファイリングは同一国内でも問題となっている。プロファイリングというのはもうインターネットのいろんな情報を見つけてキーワードでやって、この人はというと大体そんな人数像が分かりますよね。私も三宅宏で聞かれて10年前にどっかの会でこんなことされてたっていうのはずっとリストされてました。自分でも分かりましたけど、こんなところでこんなことされてたなというのがあったんですが、それはですね、ヨーロッパは政府と民間両方ですね、一つの法律で規制することになっているんですね。だから日本はですね、個人情報保護法を作ったときに、民間は個人情報保護法、それから行政機関は行政機関個人情報保護法と分けたんです。で、2015年の改正で個人情報保護法を改正して、要配慮個人情報、つまりそのセンシティブな情報をですね、ちゃんと保護するための仕組みをですね、日本の中の民間部門には作ったんです。でそれをチェックする機関として、マイナンバーだけの対象だったのを、個人情報全般を個人情報保護委員会というところでチェックする。だけど政府は抜けてるんですよね。抜けてるので、そこのところは本当は問題にしなきゃいけないということを今回ドイツを回ってですね見てきたところです。であと1分ですが、実はですね2003年に、行政機関個人情報保護法というのを作ったときにですね、私その時のメンバーだったんです。作る時の、研究会で、その時に防衛外交とか犯罪捜査の情報も対象にすべきじゃないですか。特に公安調査庁とか警察情報、警視庁公安課の情報をどうするんですかって話を実はその時したんです。それはそれとしてやってもらいましょうと。一般的にある政府の情報だけを対象にしましょうという形にはなったんですが、先ほど金立さんにも英語の、条文をお渡ししましたので、シールを貼ってありますが、Professor Cannataci, can you see the law? Especially, I take seat, blue and yellow and green. Please show. そこにですね、私どもも個人情報保護法の27条ではですね、今言った削除する権利があるんですよ。これは何人もになる。エニーパーソンなんです。エニーパーソンにはデレーションという権利持ってる。だけどこの法律は10条アーティクル10で防衛外交と犯罪捜査等に関わるもの、それから1年以内に消去するもの、今問題になってますよね。1年未満の文書ですから削除しました。あれなんですよ。こういうものには適用しないって書いてある。だからここを本来変えれば、すごく今言ったところのセーフガードの骨格ができるんじゃないかということを、実はそのドイツで考えたんです。でそういうことを国会で審議しなきゃいけないなと思って、それができない限りこんな法律通しちゃいけないと言おうと思ってたけど通ってたんで、歯ぎしりしながらその調査をやってたということをご報告して、これからの私どもの活動のですね、何か手がかりにしていただければと思います。今日は神田さんに非常にセーフガード1から22の重要な項目についてお聞きしましたけど、我々もそれについての手がかりがあるから、防衛外交とか犯罪捜査のところを変えればですね、少し変わるんじゃないかというところを議論のきっかけにできないかということが私の報告でございます。
どうもありがとうございました。それでは引き続き会場からの質問をですね受けまして、金立さんと三宅弁護士への質疑応答を行いたいと思います。コーディネーターは日本弁護士連合会共謀罪法対策本部副本部長の海渡雄一弁護士が務めます。
質問の時間がなくなってしまいましたが、質問していきたいと思います。 まずですね、金立さんに最初に伺わなければいけないのは、なぜ日本の共謀罪のこの法案の問題に興味を持たれたのか、きっかけとどういうふうに、状況を調べられたのかということを簡単に説明していただけますか。
Okay, that's going to be a short answer because I've already explained that I've been taking an interest in privacy in Japan for more than 30 years. And then recently I had been looking at the state of surveillance in Japan from about 2-3 years ago. And then at the beginning of the year I intensified my efforts when I was invited in January to the symposium by the Japan Civil Liberties Union. I then saw the law that was published in March. I then met a lot of people, Japanese outside Japan, who told me, have you seen the law? Are you going to say something about it? I said, yes. And basically the rest is history. You know, I wrote. Will you just permit me 15 seconds, just because this is a very easy. I would like to comment 15 seconds on what Professor Miyake said, just to say, I agree completely. I agree completely with everything that he said. There's a lot to be learned from the Germans. I have learned a lot from the Germans. My whole approach to the right of personality came out from the German concept of Persönlichkeitsrecht in 1983, as I was explaining yesterday and this morning. The part where I don't agree with the Germans is related chiefly to the last law they passed in last year on the part which deals with discrimination between nationals and non-EU citizens in the last law passed, and also on the degree, on the strength of the oversight authority in the last law passed. But otherwise, I think that Germany is a very important country. It's been one of the countries which has been leading in privacy and data protection, which is why, to me, it is very important that Germany gets its law right, because there are at least 45 countries around the world, including most of Europe, which looks to Germany for an example. So if Germany sets a bad example, I am in trouble. Right? I want Germany to be perfect. I want Germany to set a good example, and that is why I mentioned first. Everything else, I have agreed with you completely, and I agree that the safeguards that you put in should be somewhat modified also in any revision of Japanese law too. Thank you.
ちょっと共謀罪法そのもののことを少し、ご意見を聞きたいんですけれども、この法律の金立さんが日本政府に送られた手紙の中でも法的な明確性の原則に反するのではないかということを言われています。どういうふうにしたら明確な法律ができるのか、それともその共謀そのものを処罰するというコンセプトそのものが明確性を欠いてるんでしょうか。ということなんです。
Well, I'm going to give you one answer, which I hope will apply to a lot of other questions, since we're short on time. When I pointed out safeguards, I was also pointing out things about transparency. And when you're talking about legal certainty, it is that the citizen would want to know the outcome of an action, right? So, if a law is vague, and there are parts of the law which, as you know, seem to be quite vague, then you are not creating legal certainty. So that's why this was so important. And I'll stop here on this point, but when you are creating a situation where the citizen does not know whether he or she is under surveillance because of X-key score, because of other things, then you are in a situation of lack of certainty. And you want to be certain that the authorities are only operating under safeguards. So all the safeguards have created certainty.
共謀罪法がある国としてとても有名な国はアメリカとイギリスということになるんですが、今日もアメリカとイギリスの話題がかなり、出てまいりましたけれども、そして、アメリカもイギリスも日本よりはセーフガードが少し、良いのではないかというお話もありましたけれども、金立さんがアメリカを公式訪問されて、まだ予備的な報告だということですけれども、予備的な勧告を出されていて、 アメリカのこの監視に対する保護措置、どういう点にまだ問題が残っているか、これから改善していかなければいけないと考えられているか、差し支えない範囲で説明していただけますでしょうか。特にアメリカ、イギリスももし言及していただければ。
Okay, well, needless to say, I'm still working on the US report, so I can't tell you everything, because otherwise it won't be fair, and I'm still awaiting some answers from the US to some of the questions. I'm in a process which will take another 6 to 8 months, and the report should be published around March of next year. But some of the misgivings that I have, I've shared, and I've continued to share. I am worried about any US law where there is oversight which involves guarantees for only US persons, but does not extend those guarantees to non-US persons. And I think this is reasonable because the US is amongst the most powerful countries in the world when it comes to intelligence. It's amongst the countries which is capable of intercepting and analyzing most information. So the scale of the operations that it carries out is also relative and relevant and important to the kind of safeguards it puts in place. I am concerned that there are some areas of US intelligence which are subject to more safeguards than others. I'm concerned that there are some areas of US intelligence activities which are subject to more oversight than others. So these are little hints that I will give you, but I will ask you here, I will ask everybody in the room, everybody who's following us outside the room, everybody around Japan, to ask themselves the following question. I went through a number of safeguards. I only had time for 23 safeguards. But ask yourself the following question. Do we have those safeguards in Japan? And if not, therefore, you will know the answer to my question. Does Japan need those safeguards? And was the Anti-Conspiracy Act yet another opportunity to introduce those safeguards? Because what you need to do is create trust between the government and the people. And I think that the government of Japan lost an opportunity to create trust between the government and the people. Had the government chosen that act as the opportunity to introduce safeguards, which were needed nevertheless, even without the Anti-Conspiracy Act. And to come directly to the part of your question, other countries already have anti-conspiracy provisions in criminal law. But what they have been introducing are general safeguards against surveillance, whether the surveillance is carried out for one reason or another. Let me stop there to allow for more questions.
先ほどの、プレゼンテーションでスキップされたところがあって、そこをぜひ聞きたかったんですけれども、ヨーロッパ人権裁判所のシュレーム事件というのが2015年の10月に、判決が出ているようですけれども、これは、大量監視との関係で、ヨーロッパ人権裁判所の、見解を示したもののようです。ハンガリーの、ケースも紹介されていましたけれども、ヨーロッパ人権裁判所では大量監視というものについて、どういう法的な判断をしているのか、今日弁護士もたくさん来ていると思いますので、少しそこを説明していただけますでしょうか。
Okay. So your first question deals with Schrems. And let's remember that in the same way, now Schrems was not a decision of the European Court of Human Rights, but it was a decision of the European Court of Justice. This is confusing to Europeans, so don't worry about it. One of the first things. So let's remember what we do for. So what we do with first-year law students in Europe, we have to do this. There is not one Europe, but there are two Europes. There's the Europe of the 47, the Council of Europe, the older organization. 47 states in it. It's got the European Court of Human Rights in it. It's based in Strasbourg. Very important, comes out with very important judgments, including very important judgments on privacy, which include, if you want to see something very important about proportionality and suspicion, go and see the case Zakharov versus Russia from December of 15, sorry. Then we have the other Europe, which, to confuse people, is part of the same Europe. So, 28 member states of the Council of Europe, organized 1950, also formed another club called the EU, the European Union today. So, those 28 states have another court too. They are members of the first court and subject to the first court. So even if the United Kingdom leaves the EU, it will remain subject to the first court, the European Court of Human Rights. But there's a second court, the European Court of Justice, which is based in Luxembourg. The Schrems case comes out from the court in Luxembourg, and that court found that on the evidence it had, resulting out of the revelations from Edward Snowden, and the way that mass surveillance is carried out, it held that that there weren't enough guarantees for transferring data from Europe to the United States, because European citizens would not be treated, given the same protection as under European law. Because of that, a new agreement had to be created. It's called Privacy Shield. It's an agreement between the EU and the United States. It's an agreement which introduced concepts such as a commissioner or ombudsman to look at cases. It's an agreement which requires the US to extend more protection to EU citizens. And that's what came out. However, you have to look at the whole body of European law, because the European Court of Justice, the EU still gives a lot of weight and depends on the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. They have to be taken together. And the Schrems decision, together with a more recent decision, Elesverge 2 versus Watson, which I showed in another slide, here, this one here, the one next to it, that is the one which explicitly states that mass surveillance is not proportionate. And in fact, on the 8th of September of this year, the High Court has referred yet another UK provision to the court in Luxembourg, and we are now awaiting clarification of the Watson decision in that case. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if it's getting a bit technical, but I'm sure that the lawyers in the room will appreciate the distinctions. Thank you.
でもとても重要な情報で、日弁連もちょっとこれからきちっとこの種の判例を勉強してですね、日本政府と戦わなければいけないというふうに思っております。先ほどからですね、監督機関のことをたくさんの説明を受けたんですけれども、現実に金指さんの目から見てですね、この国にあるこういう監督機関はうまく機能しているなと。まだ理想的なものは世界中のどこにもないのかもしれませんけれども、でもオランダは比較的進んでいるというようなお話もあったんですけれども、具体的にうまくいっている機関、我々がこれから勉強するためにもですね、一つ二つ教えていただければ大変ありがたいんですが、それと、先ほどドイツで我々が見てきたデータコミッショナーというのは、そういう参考になるものの中に入りますでしょうか。
Let me start with the last question. No, the data commissioner is not sufficient to provide oversight, especially when the data commissioner is primarily tasked with oversight of everything else. Right? So if you have oversight of everything else, which includes companies, which includes police, etc., you also need to have specialized staff. right? I was told by the lawyers of some secret services in Europe who told me, so in our country, the politicians can come, the parliamentarians can come to check our files, but they don't know what to look for, right? So it's not enough to say that the politicians have oversight. It takes a thief to catch a thief. So you may want to have some staff who know a lot about surveillance in order to work in a specialized agency. So, for example, the Dutch have a specialized agency which carries out oversight of intelligence too. But did the Dutch sit still? The Dutch were already advanced 2 years ago, but now they've introduced a new law which introduces even more safeguards. Does this mean that I agree with everything in the Dutch law? No. Does this mean that I think it's perfect? No. But is it an improvement? Yes. Right? One of the problems which we don't have time to go into tonight is bulk acquisition and bulk surveillance. So that is one of the areas where I do not agree with the Dutch law. But when you look at the different authorization and different safeguards, and the way that the safeguards are extended to non-citizens, there I think that's good. The French have got an oversight system which divides competencies, so that needs to be looked at too. The British have tried to introduce a new modernized system. One of the criticisms which is leveled at both the British system and the Dutch system is that you have politicians involved. Should you have politicians involved when giving permission to an intelligence agency which could actually be carrying out surveillance on other politicians? And the answer, I think, is no, right? But, so in the UK, they've tried to temper this by having judges involved in oversight of the decision making. So this is one of those cases. The United States has a complex system of oversight. So it depends whether it's oversight internally, externally, for this system, for the other. They have a PCLOB, the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, which carries out a thorough task. But there are variations. It's too complex to go into now. But if you had to ask me, do look at the Dutch system, but also get involved in the discussion on the draft legal instrument that we are currently drafting, because that will give you an insight to which country manages to get this right and the country which manages to get the other right. At this moment in time, and that is what I've told the Japanese government, why there is no shame in discussing it, no country has got it completely right? But some countries have more safeguards than others, and some countries have almost no safeguards at all.
お客さん何かコメントがあると思います。まあ、お話で。
ぜひオランダも見に行きたいですね。つまりヨーロッパとアメリカはですね、ヨーロッパはやっぱ個人情報なりプライバシーの保護を手厚くしようというやっぱ文化が熱いので、それがまあドイツとか、まあ、フランス、イギリスそれぞれにあります。私も今回見れなかったのが最後のところはドイツの連邦の議会の議員がチェックをするというシステムがあるんですが、今の金田さんの話だと政治家に関与させるべきかっていう点はノーとおっしゃったので、ドイツの議会がチェックしている部分はノーでしょうかね。ちょっとお聞きしたいです。
No. What I'm pointing out is that life is a bit more complicated, right? Let's remember what Albert Einstein said, right? We should make things as simple as possible, but no more. And I think that legislative oversight is very important, but it's got to be part of a system, right? Apart from the legislative oversight, there's also got to be independent pre-authorization, and there's got to be, in my opinion, an independent agency, independent from Parliament, independent from the judiciary, which has the same strength as the judiciary, which has the same security of tenure as the judiciary, which cannot be fired, but which has the independence to go, together with technical experts, to carry out on-site inspections in the intelligence agencies, in the police forces, and then go back to Parliament and add its judgment to Parliament and say, we're the experts on this, we think they're doing a job, we think they're doing a bad job. If Parliament then wants to carry out even more checks and balances, that's fine. Parliament has a duty, I think, to carry out oversight of its intelligence services, but not on its own. The point I was making is, if you leave Parliament on its own, you end up with the German system of having parliamentarians who go to the secret services, but they don't know what they're looking for because they've never done the job themselves.
次にですね、一番質問したいことになるんですけれども、日弁連としてはこれから共謀罪の法律を廃止したいと思ってますし、この法律が非常に市民に、人権侵害をもたらすようなものにならないように監視をしていこうというふうに思っているんですけれども、ガータチさんのこの、日本政府に宛てた手紙に8月の22日でしたか、日本政府から正式の返答が出ているわけですけれども、そして今後これについてもまた、ガータチさんの方で意見を出されたりして、ダイアログ、対話が成立するかどうか問題ですけれども、ぜひ日本政府と緊密に対話した上で、どういう手続きをこれから取られるのか、来年の人権理事会に出されるレポートにぜひともこの日本の共謀罪の問題を、テーマとして取り上げていただきたいと思うんですけれども、今の時点で、説明できる範囲で結構ですので、カナダさん自身がこの日本政府と始めたこの対話をどういうふうに今後展開していこうとされているのかですね、難しい質問かもしれませんが、答えていただけると大変嬉しいと思います。
Okay. Well, firstly, since you mentioned the response of the Japanese government, and since that response has been published, everybody in the room can go and read it, and I believe they also have had it included in the handout. Right, it's there. You will see that at the end the Japanese government has said that it would prefer to have direct talks. And I am here repeating publicly the invitation I have made privately to the Japanese government. Do like the United States government has done, do like the United Kingdom's government has done. Invite me officially to Tokyo. I will come. I have come here unofficially this time, and I will be very happy to carry out dialogue with you. And therefore, I will not, at this moment in time, go into a detailed critique of the letter that was sent by the Japanese government and published in August of this year. I would have sought even informal meetings during my meeting here, but as you know, you must have noticed that the Japanese Prime Minister has decided to call an election, and therefore I thought it more appropriate to wait until after the election. This is just in case you didn't notice there's going to be an election. And you would have, I have therefore decided to wait until after the election, and whoever the new Prime Minister is, I don't care whether it's Mr. Abe or anybody else, because the truth is the truth. I have to say the truth. And today now, you know the truth. So I'm not going to tell you in detail what I will tell the Japanese government, but those of you in the audience who do two things. One, read the letter from the Japanese government. Two, ask yourself the question, has the Japanese government referred to, or are there any safeguards of the type that I have talked about? And then you will know the answer to the question that you have asked.
皆さんまだこの、日本政府の回答をお読みになってない方も多いと思うんですけれども、どういう回答かというかとですね、 簡単にまとめると、その法的明確性の原則に欠けているという点についてはですね、もう国会で明確であることは説明しました。もう一つですね、プライバシー侵害の危険性があるのではないかという点については、プライバシー侵害のその、危険は全くないんだと。その根拠はですね、これは刑事法、刑法の一種であってですね、刑事手続きについて定めた法律ではないと。だから、何もその捜査方法について変更をするものではないから、危険性は増えてないんだっていうふうに言うんですね。もう現実にこういう法律を作ってその捜査をすることになったら必然的に捜査の方法が変わるではないかというのが我々のポイントだったわけですけれども、それについては、十分な答えは、残念ながら得られていない状況じゃないかと思います。いずれにしても8時5分までという厳しい制約がありましたけれども、最後にやっぱり一言ずつですね、今日のシンポジウムを締めくくるお話をいただいて、このパネルディスカッションは終わりにしたいと思います。まず最初に宮城さんから一言お願いします。
私は秘密保護法の中にもですね、不正アクセス行為、特定秘密に関わる不正アクセス行為でそれをそそのかす共謀というところがあって、そこから277プラス1あるんです。そこの共謀はほんの要件が全く限定がされていないということで、先ほど吉岡副会長から話があったように、これはやはり普通に戦争ができる国になってですね、いろんな法律の手立てができているという憲法問題の裏腹の問題として、やはりこの問題をきっちり捉えていかないといけないと考えています。
実は僕は金田さんとお会いしたのは昨日が初めてで、スカイプでは2度ほどもうお話はしたことがあったんですけれども、ついに、本物というか実際にお会いできたという、感激を昨日から味わっているところなんですが、今日も非常にセーフガードの部分のですねプレゼンテーションを最後まで聞きたいと思ってですね、途中から時間で切ろうかなと思ったんですけど、これを最後まで聞いた方がいいだろうと思ってですね、全部のセーフガードの話を聞けたことがとてもこれからの我々の研究とその実践の励みになったというふうに思います。金田先生、最後にですね、共謀罪法ができて、そして国会も解散されて、これから日本はどうなっていくのか、もう大変皆さん不安でたまらないような状況で日本の市民はおるわけなんですけれども、この日本の市民に対してですね、できれば励ましの言葉をいただきたいぜひ最後の言葉をいただきたいと思います。よろしくお願いします。
Thank you. Well, I don't know the Japanese translation of the saying "hope springs eternal," right? All I would say is this: that there has never been as much interest in privacy, and there have never been as many safeguards on privacy as in 2017, right? For all the years that I have been working in privacy, I have always seen improvements, reinforcements, and these have taken place because of new laws and new operational procedures. But it means that the laws keep changing all the time. Some countries have already had 5, 6 new privacy laws over the past 30 years. So the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. Even if a new government, led by Mr. Abe, led by somebody else, whoever, even if a new government repeals or amends the Anti-Privacy, Anti-Conspiracy Act, or indeed, even if a new government brings in all the safeguards that I listed today and double that, you still need to carry out vigilance. So my hope is my wish to you and my message to you is one of encouragement. One, don't give up, because the world has never been as good as it is today. Two, keep on striving to get the new safeguards. And three, don't dream that you will have ever going to stop fighting or striving. There's always going to be a new set of threats, a new set of risks. So it's a bit, yes, it's a bit about exercise. For people like myself who love eating, in order to continue eating, I have to do more exercise, right? So keep on doing the exercise, and the exercise includes vigilance against what your politicians want to do and what the kind of powers the intelligence services and the police want to have. It is part of being a democracy, and it's part of life. Thank you very much. I look forward to the next time I'm here in Japan. Thank you.
また宮城先生どうもありがとうございました。そしてコーディネーター海野さんどうもありがとうございました。時間がかなり超過しておりますが、最後閉会にあたりまして日本弁護士連合会共謀罪法案共謀罪法対策本部ですね、角山代行ですね、本部長代行から最後のご挨拶をお願いいたします。
まず大変多くの皆様のご参加をいただき、誠にありがとうございます。本日は国連人権理事会特別報告者のジョセフ・カナタチさんから共謀罪の具体的な問題点を改めてご指摘いただき、それとともにプライバシー侵害に対する効果的な監視官の設置に関する監視官を設置することを推奨されるような他国の制度の状況や国際機関における検討の状況についてご講演をいただき、市民の皆様にいわゆる共謀罪法について改めて考えていただく機会をいただいたというふうに思っております。日弁連は本年2月17日付で、共謀罪に反対する意見書を出し、また国会上程後も法案の成立に反対する会長声明を公表するなど同法案に反対してまいりました。昨年8月末、すべての弁護士会で共謀罪法案に反対する会長声明を公表し、本年6月15日の法成立後においても多くの会が成立した法律に反対する会長声明を公表しております。しかしそれは結局強行採決を許して共謀罪法案ができてしまったという状況に他なりません。いわゆる共謀罪は現行刑法体系を根底から変容させ、犯罪を共同して実行しようとする意思を処罰の対象とする基本的性格は過去に国会に上程された法案と全く変わっておらず、市民の人権や自由を広く侵害する恐れが強いものであります。日弁連は今後も共謀罪が恣意的に運用されることがないように注視し、共謀罪の廃止に向けた取り組みを行っていきたいというふうに考えております。本日はお忙しい中最後までご参加いただき誠にありがとうございました。
それではもちまして今日のすべてのプログラムを終了いたします。皆さん本当にどうも長い間ありがとうございました。